The night my mother called me the shame of this family, something inside me died. I remember standing in the hallway, cold floor beneath my feet, the echo of her words still slicing through the air. My father looked away. My sister smiled. And my mother, she stood there, tall and trembling, as if I had ruined the name she worked her whole life to protect. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, watching the woman who gave me life turn into my judge, my enemy, my executioner. It wasn't the insult that broke me, it was the certainty in her eyes. The way she believed every word of the lie that destroyed me. For years, I tried to understand what I had done wrong. But now, when I look back, I realize it was never about me. It was about what she was hiding. Because the truth is, my mother's secret was darker than the shame she threw on me. And soon, everyone was going to know. People always said my family looked perfect. From the outside, we were the kind of family people whispered about at church, polished, respectable, wealthy enough to host those long Sunday dinners where laughter echoed louder than truth. My mother, Margaret Carter, was the heart of it all. She loved order, manners, and reputation more than she ever loved people. Her smile could melt strangers, but behind closed doors, it was sharp enough to cut. Respect, she always said, is what separates us from disappointment. My father, Daniel, stayed silent most of the time. He believed peace came from agreeing with my mother, even when she was wrong. And my sister, Claire, she was the golden one. The kind of daughter every mother dreams of, graceful, obedient, charming in public. When she entered a room, my mother's eyes softened. When I did, they hardened. I used to think maybe I wasn't trying hard enough. So I tried harder. I studied until midnight to graduate top of my class. I brought flowers for my mother's birthdays, even when she forgot mine. I smiled in every family photo, even when I wanted to disappear from the frame. But no matter what I did, I was never enough. At family gatherings, when relatives praised me for something, my mother would quickly shift the spotlight. Yes, Elena did well, she'd say, but Claire just got invited to that charity gala. Isn't that wonderful? Everyone would clap for Claire. And I'd sit there, smiling, pretending the silence inside me didn't hurt. One night, during dinner, my grandmother Helen mentioned how proud she was of both her granddaughters. I looked up, just to see my mother's hand tighten around her glass. Elena is independent, she said carefully, as if that word was both a compliment and a warning. But Claire understands family values. Claire laughed softly. Mom's just saying I don't argue as much. I tried to laugh too, but my throat felt tight. After dinner, I overheard my mother speaking to my father in the kitchen. Her voice was low but cold. She needs to learn her place, she said. People are starting to talk about her choices, her tone, her friends. I won't have our name dragged through gossip. My father didn't respond. He just sighed, the kind of sigh that meant surrender. That was the moment I realized something. In our family, love was conditional. It had to be earned, and the price was silence. I started to wonder if my mother's obsession with control came from fear. Fear of losing her perfect image, or fear of something deeper. Weeks later, during a Sunday lunch, I caught her looking at a letter she quickly hid when I entered the room. Her face turned pale, and for the first time, I saw something that looked like guilt. She smiled too quickly and said, "Don't you have somewhere to be, Elena?" And that's when I felt it, a quiet shiver in the air. Something was wrong in our perfect home, something my mother would do anything to keep buried. It started with whispers, the kind that crawl under doors and slip into conversations you're not supposed to hear. I was at my father's company office one afternoon, helping him organize client files. It was routine work, the kind he usually trusted only me with. But that day, the mood felt different. His secretary wouldn't meet my eyes. Phones stopped ringing when I walked past. And then, I heard it, a sharp whisper between two employees. "Isn't she the one who took the money?" I froze. By the time I reached home, my mother was already waiting in the living room. Her expression was stone. "Do you have something to say for yourself?" she asked. I blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" She slammed a folder onto the table, photocopies of financial reports with my name typed at the bottom. "Don't play innocent, Elena. Funds went missing under your access code. Do you realize what you've done to this family?" My heart dropped. Those were my credentials, yes, but I hadn't touched a single cent. I tried to explain, but she cut me off.
You always wanted attention.
Now you have it, for all the wrong reasons. That night, my father said nothing. He just rubbed his temples as if my existence was an inconvenience. Claire stood by the window, pretending to comfort our mother, but her eyes sparkled with something cruel. Maybe she was desperate, Claire whispered. It's sad, really. I wanted to scream, but the words died in my throat. Every time I tried to defend myself, my mother's voice grew sharper. Enough. You've humiliated us enough already. Within days, the rumor spread beyond our home. Clients withdrew contracts, friends stopped calling, and even my fiancé, Mark, became distant. He called me once, voice cold and unfamiliar. Elena, this is too much. My parents are furious. They think I can't marry into a scandal. Mark, please, I begged. You know I'd never. But the line went silent. When he returned the engagement ring through his driver, I felt something inside me crumble. My mother didn't comfort me. She simply said, "Now do you understand what your actions cost?" My grandmother Helen was the only one who looked at me with pity, not anger. Late one evening, she called me to her room. "Child," she whispered, "don't fight them now. Just watch." "Watch what?" I asked. Her frail hand trembled as she reached for mine. The truth always leaks out, even from locked drawers. Her words haunted me. Because that same week, I noticed Uncle Roy visiting our house more often. Late hours, hushed voices. Once, I caught him handing my mother an envelope, and she hid it the moment she saw me. When I asked about it, she snapped, "Mind your own business." But it was my business. My life had been ruined by her accusation, and now she was hiding something that smelled of guilt. One evening, unable to sleep, I overheard her talking to my father again. "You think she suspects?" she asked. Daniel sighed. "She's not stupid, Margaret." My mother's voice dropped to a hiss. "Then we'll make her look that way." That was the moment I understood. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a setup. And the person destroying me was the same woman who once promised to protect me. After the scandal, I became invisible, but not forgotten. In our family, silence wasn't forgiveness. It was punishment. My mother no longer shouted. She didn't have to. Her cold glances and clipped tones said more than words ever could. At breakfast, she'd pass the toast to my father, smile at Claire, and slide the butter dish away from me as if my touch might contaminate it. Claire would laugh, toss her hair, and say, "Mom, you should really stop worrying. People forget things quickly." My mother's answer was sharp. "Some things stain permanently." I started eating alone. When relatives visited, she would introduce Claire as our future, and I was introduced as Elena. "She's taking some time off right now." The way she said it, it sounded like a confession. And every time someone asked about my broken engagement, she'd sigh dramatically. "It's unfortunate, but we all make choices we regret." I stopped attending gatherings. But one day, Grandmother Helen's 79th birthday forced us all under one roof again. The house glittered with guests, laughter, and fake warmth. Claire stood in the center like she owned the spotlight, in a designer dress my mother had bought her as a reward for being strong through difficult times. I stayed near the corner, helping serve drinks. I thought I was blending into the background, until Aunt Lydia's voice cut through the crowd. "Elena, dear. So, how does it feel to be home again?" The word home sounded poisoned. Conversations hushed. My cheeks burned as everyone turned. Before I could answer, my mother's voice floated across the room. Calm, practiced. "She's still finding her way, Lydia. We all have to be patient with her. She's recovering." Recovering. As if I were diseased. I excused myself to the kitchen, holding back tears. And that's when I saw them, my mother and Uncle Roy, whispering in low, urgent voices near the pantry door. He handed her another envelope. When she noticed me, she froze. "Is there something you need, Elena?" she asked sharply. "No," I said, my voice shaking. "Just wondering what business Uncle Roy has here after midnight." Her eyes turned to ice. "You don't get to question this family anymore." Later that night, I overheard Claire talking to a cousin in the garden. "She still thinks she's innocent," Claire said, laughing softly. "Mom did what she had to do. I'd protect our name too." The cousin giggled, unaware I was standing behind the curtain. I wanted to burst through the door, scream, tell them everything.
But something in me changed that night. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I just watched.
Days passed, and I started noticing more cracks, missing files from my father's study, hushed arguments, my mother's anxious pacing at night. Even Claire seemed nervous when I walked in on her phone calls. One evening, as I passed the living room, I heard my grandmother's frail voice again. "Margaret, lies don't stay buried forever." My mother's answer was cold, trembling, "Then I'll bury whoever digs them up."
Those words stuck in my mind.
That night, I sat alone in my room, the weight of humiliation finally burning into anger.
The kind that doesn't scream, it plans.
If I couldn't earn back my dignity by begging for truth, then I'd take it. And just as I made that silent vow, a creak echoed outside my door. Someone had been listening. The morning it happened, the sky felt too calm, almost mocking. The kind of day when sunlight doesn't feel warm, just empty. My mother called for a family meeting. Her tone was clipped, formal, like we were business partners instead of blood. I walked into the living room to find everyone already seated, my father at the far end, avoiding my eyes, Claire perched on the sofa like a queen, and my grandmother in her chair, silent but alert. Uncle Roy leaned against the wall, arms crossed. There was an envelope on the coffee table.
Thick.
Official.
My gut twisted.
"Elena," my mother began, "we've discussed this long enough. Your behavior, your choices, and the damage you've caused, it can't go on."
I frowned. What damage?
"I didn't do anything wrong."
She slid the envelope toward me. "This is your release from the family trust.
Effective immediately, you'll no longer have access to any financial assets or inheritance tied to this household."
The words barely made sense.
"You're cutting me off."
"Not cutting," she said coldly.
"Protecting what's left of our name. You'll find somewhere else to stay, perhaps with one of your friends." I laughed softly, disbelief cracking my voice. "You're disowning me over a lie? Over a rumor you created?"
Her eyes narrowed.
"Watch your tone." Claire chimed in sweetly, "Mom's right, Elena.
You need time to reflect.
Maybe this is good for you, to start over."
Start over.
They were rewriting my life as if it were a paragraph in one of my mother's speeches.
I turned to my father.
"Dad, please. Say something."
He looked down, voice hollow.
"Your mother thinks this is best for everyone."
That was it. My last illusion of family shattered.
I wanted to scream, but something inside me went quiet instead.
Cold. Focused.
All the noise in the room faded. Claire's smug smile, Uncle Roy's shifting eyes, my mother's steady breathing.
I could hear only my heartbeat and my grandmother's soft sigh.
Grandmother Helen spoke up, trembling. "Margaret, this is cruelty, not discipline."
My mother's voice snapped back like a whip.
"This is protection.
Mother. She's embarrassed us enough." Tears blurred my vision.
"Embarrassed you?
Or threatened you?"
My mother froze, just for a second. The tiniest flinch. And that was when I knew my words had landed somewhere close to the truth.
She recovered quickly.
"Leave, Elena. Before I say something I'll regret." I gathered what little dignity I had left and walked out, past the photos of smiling faces that now felt like lies, past the door that used to mean home. The world outside was bright and indifferent. That night, I sat alone in a small motel room on the edge of town. The wallpaper was peeling. The air smelled of dust and rain. I replayed everything in my mind. Every insult, every dismissal, every false smile. I thought about Mark, my ex-fiancé, who never asked for my side of the story. About my father, who chose silence. And about my mother, whose obsession with reputation had turned her into a stranger. For hours, I felt nothing, not sadness, not anger. Just emptiness. Then, sometime near dawn, the numbness broke. The tears came, not soft, but shaking, angry, relentless. I buried my face in my hands, whispering through clenched teeth. Why wasn't I enough? The answer came like a whisper from memory, my grandmother's voice. The truth always leaks out, even from locked drawers.
And suddenly, I wasn't crying anymore. I was thinking, remembering.
The late-night visits.
The envelopes.
The way my mother had flinched at my words. She wasn't protecting the family's reputation. She was protecting herself. I went back to the last thing I'd seen before leaving the house, the photograph that had fallen outside my door, my mother and Uncle Roy, smiling at a charity event, his hand on her waist.
I had thought it was just old gossip. But now, I wasn't so sure.
What if that was the key? What if the entire scandal, the false accusation, my public humiliation, my disinheritance, was designed to bury a secret far worse than mine? I wiped my tears, my breathing steadying for the first time in weeks. The pain was still there, but it had changed. It wasn't weakness anymore. It was fuel. I whispered to myself, the words tasting sharp and new. They took everything from me. Now, I'll take back the truth. That night, for the first time, I didn't feel like the shame of the family. I felt like the storm coming for it. If my mother thought destroying me would keep her secret safe, she just gave me every reason to expose it. For the first time since they turned their backs on me, I felt something like clarity, not the soft, confused kind I'd lived with, but a clean, cold focus. The humiliation hadn't vanished, it had sharpened into a purpose.
I stopped asking why and began asking how.
I moved into a small room above a bakery, the smell of fresh bread greeting me each morning like a promise. Days that used to blur with tears now had a rhythm. Wake, sort facts, knock on doors, listen. I owed myself a method, not a meltdown.
First, I rebuilt the timeline.
Every suspicious visit, every envelope, every late-night whisper I'd chalked up to paranoia, I wrote them down like a map. The photograph that had fallen outside my door became my North Star, Margaret and Uncle Roy on the same night as a missing client deposit. I listed names, dates, possible witnesses. I called the receptionist at Dad's firm, cautiously. She remembered Roy's visits and the name of a courier who often delivered urgent envelopes late at night. It wasn't much, but a single thread can unwind a whole sweater. I found an unexpected ally in Mrs. Han, our former housekeeper, who had been quietly dismissed months before the scandal. She cried when I knocked on her door, but she also opened a showbox of old receipts and letters she'd kept, things my mother thought thrown away. People don't always throw out what hurts them, she said, pressing a faded envelope into my hand. Inside were notes, a name, and a stamp from a business Roy ran under a different title. I stopped trying to plead with people who already judged me. Instead, I gathered proof. Not through hacking or violence, through patience, memory, and the stubbornness of someone who has nothing left to lose. I learned to record conversations with my phone tucked into my coat.
I photographed files with a borrowed camera.
I made copies of receipts and matched handwriting across envelopes. When my grandmother muttered about locked drawers, I enlisted her subtly. She'd noticed the pattern of Roy's visits. She remembered a date. Her memory was small details, the exact shade of a blouse, the way a laugh stopped. And in those small details I found openings. I practiced my voice, too. The old Elena was the pleading one. The new Elena spoke soft, sure, almost like a calm that made people listen. You think you can break me and be safe, I said aloud once, to the empty room, testing the sound.
It felt like steel.
There were risks. I nearly got caught rifling through the study when Claire returned early one afternoon. Her eyes were sharp as knives. She asked, suspicious, "What are you doing?" I smiled, lied, and carried the photocopy tucked in my bag like contraband. My heart pounded for minutes afterward. The danger tasted sweet, the first sign that I was alive with purpose instead of dying from shame. I didn't hire a lawyer yet. I couldn't afford it and didn't want legal threats to tip them off. Instead, I prepared something cruder and cleaner, evidence assembled into a single, undeniable moment. Recordings, receipts, the photograph, Mrs. Han's testimony, and a trembling but genuine note from my grandmother that confirmed dates. I tested the recorder until the playback sounded like confession. Finally, I set the stage like a director setting lights. I would call a family dinner, a simple thing my mother would never refuse. I would sit in the same room I had been banished from, and I would play what I had collected.
No shouting. No violence.
Just truth in the clearest form I could make it. On the evening of the dinner, I stood outside my car for a long moment, the recorder tucked into the pocket of my coat like a sleeping animal. My hand hovered over it, fingers trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of what would happen when I pressed play. The dining room glowed in soft amber light, the same light that once made our home look warm, loving, almost perfect. Now it felt like the stage of an execution. My mother sat at the head of the table, pearls around her neck, a smile carefully painted on her lips. Claire sat beside her, scrolling through her phone, pretending to be bored. My father occupied his usual silent corner, while Uncle Roy poured himself a glass of wine, his hand trembling just slightly. Grandmother Helen sat opposite me, eyes sharp, her expression unreadable.
I took a deep breath and forced a smile.
Thank you all for coming, I said softly. I just wanted one peaceful family dinner, after everything.
My mother nodded curtly.
That's the least you can do after all the trouble you've caused.
Her words landed like small, familiar knives.
I didn't flinch. Instead, I leaned back, eyes calm. You're right.
I caused a lot of pain.
But maybe tonight, we should talk about why that pain really started.
Claire scoffed.
Please, Elena.
Don't start another drama.
Mom's finally moved on.
Has she?
I asked. Then I slipped my hand into my pocket and placed the small voice recorder in the center of the table. The faint click echoed through the room.
My mother's smile stiffened. What is that?
Just a reminder, I said, pressing play. The room filled with the sound of her voice, clear, unguarded, terrified. It's over, Roy. If Elena ever finds out, we're finished. Every breath, every trembling syllable hit the air like thunder.
My father froze. Claire's eyes widened.
Uncle Roy dropped his fork. Turn that off, my mother shouted, rising to her feet.
But I didn't.
The recording continued, the rustle of papers, her voice again.
She's asking questions.
We have to make her look guilty before she finds the letters.
The silence that followed was deafening. I looked straight at her.
So that's what I was, your cover story.
My mother's face drained of color.
You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I cut in, my voice steady.
You framed your own daughter to protect a lie.
You stole money with your brother, then blamed me when the numbers didn't add up. You destroyed my reputation so yours could survive. Claire stood slowly, whispering, Mom, tell me that's not true. Margaret turned toward her, voice breaking for the first time. Claire, listen to me. But Claire pulled away, shaking her head. You did all this, for him. She looked at Uncle Roy, disgusted. You said Elena was poison to this family. You made me believe it. Uncle Roy muttered, Margaret, stop talking.
My father finally spoke, his voice trembling.
Is it true? Margaret, answer me. My mother's eyes darted from face to face, searching for an ally, finding none.
I did what I had to do, she said quietly.
I protected us. No, I said, stepping forward.
You protected yourself. You built this house on lies and called it dignity.
You used your children as props for your pride. The air felt electric, the chandelier lights flickering above us. My grandmother spoke then, her voice calm but sharp. You shamed the wrong person, Margaret. The real disgrace was never Elena. For the first time, my mother's mask cracked. Tears filled her eyes, but her voice turned defensive. You don't know what it's like, to carry a mistake for years, to wake up every day terrified it'll come out. And yet, I said softly, it just did. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. My father stood up slowly, pushing his chair back. You've destroyed this family, Margaret. She tried to reach for him, but he stepped away. Claire walked out, shaking her head, whispering, You ruined us. My mother sank into her chair, shaking, whispering my name as if begging for mercy. But I had none left to give. I picked up the recorder, switched it off, and whispered, You once called me the shame of this family. Tonight, you finally met her. I turned and walked out, leaving behind the echoes of gasps, shattered illusions, and the sound of a reputation collapsing under its own lies. Behind me, I heard my mother sob. Not from guilt, but from the horror of knowing that the truth she buried had finally risen to destroy her. The night after the dinner, the Carter house was silent for the first time in years.
No lectures. No arguments.
Just the hollow stillness that comes when every lie has finally run out of breath. I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch steps until dawn, watching the sky trade darkness for light. It felt poetic, almost cruel, that the sun still rose over a house built on so many shadows. By morning, word had spread. In a family that prided itself on keeping secrets, silence became the loudest confession. Claire moved out 2 days later. She couldn't bear to look at our mother. My father retreated to his office, where the blinds stayed closed. Uncle Roy vanished, like smoke after a fire. And my mother, she barely came out of her room. The woman who once ruled every conversation now spoke to no one. When I finally saw her, she was sitting by the window, holding a torn family photo, the same one that used to hang in our hallway. She looked smaller, older, like the weight of her own lies had finally bent her shoulders. "Elena," she whispered, "you've destroyed everything."
I shook my head gently. "No, Mother."
I just stopped pretending it was perfect. Her eyes filled with tears, but I felt none. I had cried too many times already. The difference now was, I wasn't crying from weakness. I was done bleeding for a family that had already buried me. Before I left the house for the last time, my grandmother called me into her room. Her voice trembled but carried strength. "You did what none of us could," she said. "You gave truth a name again."
I smiled faintly. "It's not victory, Grandma. It's peace." She nodded.
"Peace is victory for those who've lived in fear." I hugged her one last time, then walked out, this time not as the outcast, but as the only one who dared to stand tall.
The air outside felt different. Cleaner.
Every breath tasted like freedom. I rented a small apartment downtown, started working again, and slowly rebuilt the life my mother tried to erase. People still whispered about the Carter scandal, but I learned something about whispers. They fade when you stop feeding them with shame. Sometimes, I still dream of that night, the gasps, the shattered pride, the truth spilling across that perfect dinner table. But instead of pain, I feel something softer. Relief.
I never wanted revenge to destroy her.
I just wanted to reclaim what she stole from me, my dignity. And in the end, that's exactly what I did. Weeks later, I got a letter in the mail, unsigned, but I knew her handwriting. It read, "You were right.
I lost everything trying to look perfect.
I hope someday you forgive me, not for me, but for yourself." I folded it carefully, placed it in a drawer, and whispered to the empty room. "Forgiveness isn't forgetting, Mother. It's freedom from needing your approval." For the first time in years, I smiled, not for anyone else, not to survive a dinner table or defend my name, but because I finally knew who I was without their permission.